Brandon Marshall ruined the I Am Athlete podcast. Mr. Brandon Marshall, my fraternity brother in Kappa Alpha Psi, he ruined the I Am Athlete podcast without question. Like, y'all, I believe that Brandon's ego got the best of him, it got way too big. And I think he started to believe that the show was popping because of him mainly, right? And while he may have gotten the group of guys together, the show maintained, people kept coming back, not for Brandon, but for the dialogue and the banter between Fred, between Ocho, between Channing Crowder. That's really what we came back for. And I think Brandon really, he started thinking he was just the face of the whole thing. And of course, he may have started it, but I think he started to feel like he was just the face of the entire organization, the face of the entire thing so much that he didn't want to give his boys equal partnership. When his boys really put in the work, they really, really put in the work to make that podcast pop. I promise you, if it's just Brandon Marshall every week just interviewing people, that podcast wouldn't be what it is. And I can say that I was a big fan of Brandon Marshall as an NFL player. But I can tell you right now, that show wouldn't be half as interesting. Wouldn't be 1/4 as interesting if it wouldn't have been for Channing, Fred, and Chad and the chemistry between all those individuals. But I think Brandon had this idea of wanting to make I Am Athlete a brand so much. And I think, him and his business partners and him and his wife sat down and they wanted it to be a brand for their own so much that they didn't value, the other workers on the show, not even the other workers, the other partners on the show. They started to look at them as just workers. And I said it out my mouth. Brandon started to look at Fred, Channing, and Chad as just workers and not partners. He didn't value them. He didn't see what they brought to the table. He didn't see what they made, how they made the show pop. And unfortunately right now, I Am Athlete is going down while the Pivot podcast is steadily soaring, right? And I know some people may say, well, I Am Athlete still got some videos with 1 million views after they left. But what's holding up I Am Athlete is the fact that they can get some really good guests every once in a while. But I don't really go because I know that, Brandon and them can't make a good conversation with everybody. I love Pac-Man Jones. Pac-Man, that's my dog. Pac-Man don't really bring nothing to the show like that. I hate to say it, I love Pac-Man as a player, but he's not really interesting. Shady is the most interesting on the show, but as much as interesting as Shady can be, the most interesting he's been on there was when he was a guest. But together as a collective, they can't make an interview with just anybody interesting. I can watch the Pivot podcast interview anybody, and they can make it interesting. They can make it to where a person would be like, damn, I never knew that. Damn, this is interesting. I really want to sit down and watch it more. I Am Athlete has to have a Lil Wayne or somebody that is astronomical on this show to get even 1 million views. Or even to get, not even 1 million, because that's a reach. To get even 500,000 or 400,000, they have to have somebody astronomical. If not, it's a wrap. And I'm looking at the numbers and it's no comparison. It's no comparison, man. And that's because there was more substance on the other side within those other individuals. As much as I was a fan of Brandon cut folks off all the time. He kept trying to produce viral moments out of everything. After that one time, they went viral for having that argument about if NBA players get guaranteed contracts or not. And he kept trying to recreate that moment instead of just being authentic to what the brand truly was. A group of friends having dialogue about sports, about mental health, about, friendship, so on and so forth, and about financial literacy within the Black community. When they were just having these regular discussions, everything was beautiful. It was popping. But the moment they got when they got really good success, Brandon started to, oh my God, I got to turn this into a brand of my own, right? I got to turn this into something astronomical. And so he started doing the NASCAR stuff, which was terrible. NASCAR was cool for 1 or 2 episodes, but when you try to make it a series, hell no, brother. I know people who love NASCAR who don't watch that shit on TV and don't watch interviews from the NASCAR drivers. It's just after a couple of interviews, Bubba Wallace, Dale Earnhardt and them, Who else you could probably want if you want to get Jeff Gordon? Cool. But other than that, no. I was like, yo, I'm not watching them until they come back with regular content. I was not gonna watch that the NASCAR thing, and I can tell Channing them probably wasn't on board with that. But maybe NASCAR threw a bag at Brandon, and he was like, I gotta capitalize off of this. Okay, cool if that's the case, right? But the NASCAR stuff, no. Then he started trying to have the what's the name? He started trying to have the I Am Athlete LA, which was terrible. I'm sorry. Swaggy P is just way too damn childish for me to take him serious. Like, way too childish for me to take him serious in conversation. I can't do it. Chad can be silly, but he can have really good, meaningful conversation. Nick Young, Swaggy P is going to go whatever. He's going to go with whatever the popular person on the show says. If they have a popular guest, he going to just go with it, whatever that popular person says and agrees with. I'm not trying to listen to a conversation where a person's just going to agree with whatever the popular person says. Nah, fam, count me out. I love, what's my boy name? Defensive guy, golly. This brother, Michael Bennett. Michael Bennett, my dog. But Mike couldn't keep that show up on his own accord. Brandon Jennings is cool when he on the court and he being charismatic, but in the interview, he too damn cool for school. Like, just too, I'm trying to be too player, too cool. No. That's not good for a podcast. It's not. You got to have dialogue. You got to be interesting. You got to have more of a personality to get the people enamored with the show. Because I can tell you this right now. When Fred, Channing, and Chad were on I Am Athlete, women that never watched football, that hardly ever watched football, was coming to that podcast because of the stuff they were talking about and how they made it relatable to the everyday man. Not just to only athletes who just played and hooped all the time. They kind of made it to a way where it would be interesting to a person who never even knew certain things about the sport. Channing would have all these silly anecdotes about his life, and you know, when he took his check up there and he saw he wanted to, when he got like what did he say, 500,000, something like that, 550,000. He took it into the bank because it was a fine old red bone girl that worked behind the counter, and he wanted to get her. And when she saw that check, she called him Mr. Crowd, and she looked up at him and smiled, and he said, I got her too. I got her. I hit her. Right? It's funny stuff, right? Chad talking about McDonald's and how he played, and you know, advocating for people to go to HBCUs because you still can make it and still can be successful, successful football player, and still can get noticed at an HBCU like the greats of yesteryear or greats of the past did. You got Fred Taylor, the voice of reason, who like the OG. Every time he talk is soothing. You like, this brother gonna come with some real talk. You know, but I watched Fred and them discuss on Cam Newton's podcast. They sat down with Cam and they discussed their departure from the I Am Athlete podcast. And you can tell they like, man, they don't fool with B. Marshall like that. They don't, because Brandon really didn't value them at all. He did them bogus. He didn't want to split up the pie evenly with them. He didn't want to. He wanted to be the only owner of the whole thing and didn't want to give his mans them the ownership cut. Which ain't right because they made that show. I didn't see the episode of I Am Athlete where they was talking about the breakup. And I heard my boy told me that LaShawn McCoy Shady was like, you know, they should be blessed that, you know, grateful that you gave him an opportunity. All right, cool. He made the podcast. Oh, I mean, he started the podcast and let them come on, but gave them the opportunity. Like, Channing and Fred and them took the opportunity. They made the opportunity into what it was. I watched their podcast grow and grow and grow every single week. And they took it and they owned the room every time they came and spoke on camera. That wasn't Brandon coaching them on how to be or coaching them on what to say. He wasn't leading the conversations. I mean, he wasn't leading them into being a character. I'm sorry. He may have started the conversations. He may have led and started dialogue off with certain topics, but he wasn't leading them into certain answers and certain responses. He wasn't coaching them up on how to be charismatic and how to captivate an audience. He wasn't doing that. So they owned the room. They seized the opportunity. Yeah, he gave it to them, but he gave them the opportunity to come on a podcast. But nah, fam, they took the opportunity. And they made the most of it. And that's why everybody, majority that was watching I Am Athlete, have since, some people go back and forth. I go back and forth at times, but like, you know, I go back and forth. But sometimes I just can't watch I Am Athlete when they don't have an interesting guest on. I'm like, fam, I'm struggling to get through this interview. They're not asking good enough questions. the questioning flow is not really good. Brandon is not really, he's not keeping the audience engaged in a way where we have a good dialogue where it's like, it's meaningful stuff, right? They had Antonio Brown on the show, and I promise y'all, if that was, when they had Antonio Brown, when everything first popped off, like, bro, they wasn't really even asking some of the real hard questions. They wasn't really trying to challenge Antonio Brown and see where his mental in his head was. For real. Swaggy P over there agreeing with everything Antonio Brown says. That's why I really like Channing Crowder, because if he don't feel something, he gonna say he disagree. Now, whether I disagree with him or not, he's gonna say how he really feels, and he not just gonna go with whatever the popular opinion is because this said person that we're talking about is in front of us. Even if that person is in front of him, he gonna like, nah, fam, that was wrong. I don't agree with that. I think this should have happened, that should have happened. Fred Taylor gonna speak his mind. Nah, fam, I think you handled it the wrong way. You could have went about it this way, that way, so on and so forth. Chad Johnson as well. It's gonna be a way better conversation flow. I'm not sitting here listening to Swaggy P and them agree with everything Antonio's saying, and then Brandon trying to provide some pushback, but instead he really trying to just make a little viral moment and offer some silly banter a little bit at times. I'm like, no, fam, I can't. Nah, this is not good. This doesn't make for a good podcast to me, right? And I'm sad because I'm not sad because Brandon and Channing are still there, but I missed the dynamic with Ocho and all them all in one setting. They had something beautiful, and an ego got in the way of it, and that's Brandon Marshall trying to make it into a whole. I'm trying to make this into a gym, and I'm trying to expand it this way, expand it that way. Listen, slow and steady wins the race. Take your time, keep building up y'all brand in the podcast, keep doing your thing. All this trying to have them, we're going to do the gym. No, that's not what they signed up for. They signed up for a podcast and to focus on a podcast and deliver meaningful dialogue to the world, meaningful stuff. Like what the Pivot Podcast did with Michael Beasley, that was special. What they did with Mike Tomlin, fire stuff, man. Like Jamarcus Russell, those were like, man, I promise y'all, I bet Brandon and them would have dropped the ball so bad interviewing Jamarcus Russell or interviewing Michael Beasley. You know, they would have just tried to keep it basketball. Because the Pivot, they have great awareness. They went into the conversation with Michael Beasley going to talk about his college career, how he was putting up video game numbers, how he was just this otherworldly basketball player, and how he played with all these great players coming up. That was going to be the focus. But Ryan Clark, shout out to Newt, also my fraternity brother in Kappa Alpha Psi. Shout out to Ryan Clark too, right? Ryan Clark saw, no, this brother I'm seeing something, man. He's going through some things. He needs to talk about his mental health. He needs to talk about his emotion, and we need to talk about what's going on with him. We need to talk about what happened to him and what transpired to where he's at this mental state he's at right now, where he's at this emotionally vulnerable state that he's in right now. We need to talk about this and have this discussion, because this is more important than basketball and the numbers that he put up at Kansas State, right? That awareness that the Pivot Podcast has, and Ryan Clark and Fred Taylor and Channing Crowder, that awareness they have, makes for an amazing podcast, and is why their show is thriving. And it's why they're doing better numbers than Brandon and I Am Athlete, man. That's just my opinion. Y'all let me know what y'all think about my video in the comment section below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video. I'm out. Peace.